united marriages, united couples produce united, strong, God-fearing children and families.
Thank you for joining us for the Blended Kingdom Families podcast. This podcast is for blended families, the people who love them, and anyone who just wants to improve their marriage and family relationships.
BKF exists to break the cycle of divorce, equip marriages, and unite blended families with the truth of God's Word. It is our hope that today you will receive biblical guidance and practical resources that will bring unity and peace to create your thriving, healthy home. Let's jump in.
Hey guys, welcome back to the BKF podcast. We are super pumped that you are here with us. If you haven't already, take a minute, like, share, comment, subscribe, leave us a comment or a review. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear those as well.
Yes.
If you're listening on Audible, just know that the full video format to see we'll see your pretty face, is on our YouTube channel. You can go subscribe and be updated every Monday when we drop a new podcast. Today, we're going to be continuing a series that we started 2 weeks ago on co-parenting.
Yes.
And last week, we talked about communication. The previous week, we kind of just did an overview of the whole series. And this is all based upon a book that we're releasing in September through XO Marriage called Blended and Redeemed. We are super pumped. Pre-orders are going to start, I think, this summer. Or whenever you're listening to this. It started in the summer of 2022 for the release in September. So today, we're going to be diving into discipline.
Yes.
Which is a fun topic, by the way.
Well, we get a lot of questions on this.
A lot of them, yeah.
A lot of questions on this.
So, and we know kids are kids. And I don't care if you are in a blended family, nuclear family, you got 25 kids or you got one. They're always going to be kids.
Yeah. Well, and disciplining in your blended family, it can be difficult for a multitude of reasons, right? So we talk about these in the book, and I would say the first one is when you have a new step parent. So you've just blended, new step parent.
That is me in a nutshell.
Scott Martindale in a nutshell. When you come into the marriage and you have zero skills with raising kids because you haven't. So maybe you're a step parent who has never had children. You're now stepping into this role as a mom or a dad, and you've never had experience raising children. So that can be one of the difficulties when it comes to disciplining, because you're like, hey, I've never done this before. Like, I need help. Another one can be, as a biological parent, myself, so to speak, you can be concerned with how they're going to discipline your children, how they're going to treat them. That can be a lot for a biological parent.
Yeah.
And then the third one I would say is how enacting discipline might affect the child's still developing relationship with the step parent. So we talk about establishing trust a lot in the step parent, stepchild relationships, because when you start implementing that discipline, if there isn't that strong foundation, that can become a difficult point right there. And then also a parent's unwillingness to allow their new spouse to correct the child's behavior, which We've counseled a lot of couples where that's a sore point right there. So these are some of the things that we're going to unpack today.
Yeah, I just kind of go back to it. When I became a step parent, I knew nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, I say I knew nothing. I remember how I was raised, which I'm super glad that I forgot that at a certain point, because that wasn't probably the most healthy way. But I didn't really understand discipline.
Yeah.
I will tell you, as a new step parent, and I think we're going to go into this at some point, but I just want to tell a story before we kind of get started.
Yeah.
Of if you're a step parent and you're listening to this and you're kind of in that new blended situation. I remember having a conversation with your ex-spouse and me just calling him and saying, hey, I'm here.
Yeah.
And I want to do this the right way, and I want to respect your role as his father. So let's talk about discipline.
Yeah.
Let's just lay it out. What are you comfortable with? What am I comfortable with?
Yeah.
How are we going to move forward in this? And that really set the tone.
Yeah.
Because it was me kind of going to the situation going, I don't know anything about this.
Yeah.
So I'm eliciting your help and your help.
Right.
So I wanted to do the best I could just as a step parent first. But I know there are other parents that are in that situation, new step parents that are in the situation. But everything you talked about is so on point to a lot of the comments and feedback we get about discipline.
Yeah.
Because discipline, it's almost, that is the precursor to blended families not respecting their marriage in a lot of ways. And I know we'll go into that as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've developed a 5-point plan for disciplining children in a blended family. So the first one is bio parents take the lead. Second, parents present a united front.
Yes. Very important. Very important.
Yes. And both bio parents are on the same page if possible. Serious issues are communicated to the other parent. And the one I love the most, drop-off day issues do not constitute a free pass.
No free pass.
So we're going to dive into that one. So bio parents taking the lead. This is new, a lot of times in new blended families.
Yeah.
We have people that ask us all the time, I'm obviously the husband in our relationship, the man of our house, but I'm not the bio parent.
Right.
So this was something that we had to ease into, especially in our new blended family. So why is it important, Vanessa, that bio parents take the lead, especially newly?
Yeah. Well, and like I just said a few minutes ago, we talk about that trust factor, right? So I have been, I had 8 years previously with Michael, just me and him. And so we have this established relationship. And as you and Michael were beginning, to establish your relationship and that trust was being built, and we talked about this. We felt that it was important for me and for Michael's dad to continue to discipline, together to a point of, we are in agreements of the discipline that happens at our house is something that they try to mirror as well. We try to our best to ability to do that. Not every blended family situation can do that, but we felt in our blended family, we wanted to try to do that.
Yeah.
But then also, as you and Michael progressed in your relationship, there was a point when, I kind of started taking more of a back seat. And then when there were opportunities for you to do that, I supported you in that role.
Yeah.
And so if you're a biological parent listening, you guys, it is so important that we reassure and that we back up the step parent when it comes to those opportunities where they can discipline. And again, like we talked about, that united front, you want to come with your spouse. You want to talk about ways that you want to discipline together or what you think is appropriate, what calls for serious action, things like that. You want to have those conversations beforehand, because if you're in the moment, if you're in the heat of it, and maybe there's something that you say that I don't agree with, you don't want to present that opportunity for the children to see, oh, they don't agree. So, having those conversations beforehand, I think is important.
Yeah.
So
I would also point out, guys, I think in blended families, a lot of times the measurement of success is a disciplined family. So it's like everybody is doing their part, everybody is following the rules, and all of a sudden that becomes the marker of, are we successful in a blended family? And understanding that may be true in some ways. That is the relationship of order. That's how we know things are going the right way. It's maybe how we know that a good foundation was laid. But I also want to tell step parents out there, you can't discipline without love first. You cannot be in a position of authority if you don't have a love base.
Yeah.
So that's why we talk about the bio parent taking that lead, because really what you're doing as a step parent is you're establishing the foundation of love. You are building a relationship, you are building trust and bonds, so that when discipline does become part of your equation, that child knows that you love them first.
Yeah, that's so good.
That has to be there. You will not get the dedicated response that you want from discipline if there's not a love base.
Yeah, and regardless of the response, because we're going to get responses that we don't like. You've gotten responses from Michael that are tough. But I love that you said that, Scott, that, disciplining from a place of love, because, Michael knows that I love him, right? And so when I discipline him, he knows, okay, this is for my good. I don't like it. But I know that my mom loves me and she's not going to do anything that's going to harm that relationship or do anything that's not good for me. But when they have this new person that's come into their life, establishing that trust, them understanding and knowing Scott really does love me. He really does want the best for me, and then whenever those opportunities for disciplining come into play, you can go into that, and they can go into that knowing, okay, this is for my good, and he's not going to hurt me. He's not here to take my dad's place. He's not here to make my life miserable. He's here to play an important part, to be a support. And if they don't understand that as children, you do as you get older. I know I did as an adult.
Well, and in our situation, I had no children too. So this is the tricky part.
Yeah.
So you're coming into a blended family, and let's say that I had 2 children and she had 2 children, and all of a sudden we blended this family. And now as a step parent and as a bio parent, now step parent, so you're both step parents and you're both bio parents.
Yeah.
Because this is a very common situation in blended families. All of a sudden you're having to discipline differently.
Yeah.
You're having to say, okay, these people I can do this, these folks I can do this. And I would say, yes, you're right. You cannot put one size fits all over the entire family as you are starting your blended family, or, depending on where you are in the situation. So yes, you do have to be intentional to say, I can't discipline as a group.
Yeah.
And I have to be intentional about both, because that's where a lot of people make mistakes is they're used to this pattern of, this is how I discipline, this is how I discipline my kids. Well, just because you do it to your kids doesn't mean you can do it to your stepchildren. Not at first. It has to be a gradual process.
Yeah, and I think one other point to add to why the bio parent should lead as well is, if you're a step parent and you don't have children of your own and you're coming into this freshly, I would say, watch the biological parent, ask questions, be inquisitive about what the child receives, what they don't receive. We talk about children's love languages a lot. Our words are powerful and have deep meaning. And so I think being very careful with the words that we use, and, you may not fully understand all that they have gone through. So I think that's really important for step parents is, the more you're communicating with your spouse, ask those questions. Watch how bio parent and stepchild, watch that dynamic when there are those opportunities for discipline. I think that's really good. But going into the next point, which is the united front, it's important for both blended families and traditional families. Like we all need to have a united front when it comes to disciplining our children, because if we don't, that creates opportunity for children, one, to manipulate. They know. They know if y'all are not getting along or on the same page. But 2, when they can see that mom and dad are united, you guys, united marriages, united couples produce united, strong, God-fearing children and families. So it is so important that we are united in our disciplining.
Yeah, if you can imagine a scenario, let's say, you're at the dinner table and, little one is acting up or doing something different. Again, being a parent does not have to come without planning. You can plan to be a parent, and that is planning in your reactions, planning in your speech, planning in your discipline. So if you can imagine, you're at dinner and there's a problem, and all of a sudden your spouses look at each other and be like, we're going to go in the other room and we're going to discuss your punishment.
Yeah.
That's good. Gosh, that child's like,
they're probably like, whoa.
They collectively are deciding what's the worst they can do to me.
Yeah.
But I remember, even us having conversations of, first of all, there are times when, something is said and maybe the other parent doesn't agree, but they don't challenge the other parent in front of the children.
Yeah.
They may later on, like right before bedtime, be like, hey, can you explain why you said this and maybe what you were thinking? And it's okay if there's a rational, like, hey, this is what I was thinking. Or it might be, you know what, I was just emotional about that and I probably shouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna make that right. So there's nothing wrong with collectively going back and having that conversation. And then there's nothing wrong with, both parents coming together and go, this is the problem. What do you think we should do?
Yeah.
What do I think we should do? And then collectively coming up and collectively delivering the punishment.
No, I think that's great. And I think, one thing that Scott and I, that there were a few times we've done this wrong before, because I know there were some times, and this was a point that I talked about earlier, you guys, where the biological parent can be concerned with how the new spouse will discipline the child. I know that there's been times when, you were disciplining Michael and I would interrupt and say, oh my, you're being too hard on him, and that just wasn't good. And I remember us collectively coming together and just being like, okay, we can't do this. So if there are those moments where maybe you feel like one parent is being too harsh on the child, taking opportunity and just saying in that moment, like, hey, let's go in the other room real quick and have that conversation. Like you just said about, deciding collectively what the punishment is going to be. It's so important that we do not do what I did to you in the beginning of our relationship, where one parent, where maybe the step parent is in the heat of the moment, disciplining the child. They need that reassurance from you. They need that backstep of like, hey, like, this is what's going to happen, and you're going to listen to your step parent. And that's something that we struggled with in the beginning, but we had to sit down and have that intentional conversation. Well,
and you use these as, bonding moments for you as a relationship and as a marriage too.
Yeah.
Kids are going to get in trouble. And, one of the things that we don't really go into detail here, and we do in the book, is, kids are going to have problems. And, you may always look at this and go, well, this is a blended family problem.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's just a 12-year-old problem.
Yeah.
And, collectively we can solve that. But as parents, just realizing that, hey, through this journey of blending family, I may have my biological kids, you may have your biological kids, we have stepchildren together. This is our story that we're writing, and we're going to write an intentional story about how we came together, we disciplined together, we did things, we built our relationship and our foundation on love and our discipline. We can do that effectively, but it doesn't have to be a sense of conflict all the time.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And as a step parent, we've talked about this in the book. We're continuing to build trust with one another, And so as you're in a newly blended family and you're continuing to build that trust and you're continuing to build that discipline trust, so to speak, one of the things that we can do to damage that really fast is to ask those questions or question their authority in front of the children.
Yeah.
So, there's nothing wrong with disagreeing with either parent when it comes to disciplining, but as long as those disagreements are discussed privately.
Yeah. And these are things that we're talking about really as the blended family, but we also want to just kind of touch on, when the biological parents are on the same page with discipline.
Yeah.
So again, it kind of goes back to I remember I had a conversation right when we got married and said, hey, this is really where I see discipline. And for me, I wasn't a corporal punishment kind of guy.
Yeah.
I just, the spanking, I knew I wasn't going to physically spank Michael. It just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Because I knew that would be a point of contention in our blended family.
Yeah.
So as biological parents, as you guys, and as they got older, it's like, hey, how are we going to address these things? Just having those conversations. What types of things can happen between biological parents when it comes to discipline?
One of the things is you may just not agree, and the child is in two different households. So what they may discipline their other children with at one household, can be very different from what you do in your household. And so, what you don't want is your children playing one biological parent against the other.
Yeah.
So that is something, just always keep at the forefront of your mind. So you want to communicate regularly. And that's where we just talked about in our previous episode about healthy communication.
Yeah.
So making sure that you're communicating on a regular basis so that there's no room for manipulation. There's no room for the child to misinterpret what is going on and share that with the other biological parent so that it causes room for disagreement.
Yeah. And there's just regular behavioral issues that happen, and it's just a conversation of, hey, how are you going to handle this? How am I going to handle this?
Yeah.
And it may be something that's like, hey, there's a problem at school. So when there's a problem at school, it's actually a good opportunity to talk because you're both going to get notified. Hey, Susie did X and she got in trouble.
Yeah.
So, having that communication of, hey, how's that going to work?
Yeah.
And it really kind of, there are more serious issues, and I do want to touch on those. We're talking about a lot of the little things.
Sure.
If it's a serious issue, you need to talk to each other.
Yeah.
If it's substance abuse issue, if it's stealing, if it's really lying, things that are really affecting your family that really affect both families.
Yeah.
It's just that's a part where you have to reach out and be like, hey, we need to talk and get on the same page here.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's great. Yeah. And when biological parents are on the same page, children thrive in environments of routine and of structure. And I think a good thing too is ask for the other parent's thought on behavioral issues and what they think a good punishment would be. As our son has gotten older, we actually ask him. There have been times when, Michael has done things he's not supposed to. And I'm like, well, what do you think that your punishment should be?
Yeah.
And it's interesting to hear what he'll say sometimes because I'm like, man, that's a really good punishment. I wasn't thinking that hard, but okay, I'm like, if you want to clean up the whole entire backyard, you go right ahead.
Yeah.
So I don't have to do that. And that obviously changes as children get older, but I think and that's another way to extend the olive branch to your ex-spouses. This is what we were thinking for punishment. What do you think that his punishment should be or her punishment when it does come to those really, really serious issues?
Yeah. And the last thing we're going to talk about, which is, I can just remember back. It doesn't happen as much now, but I remember back.
Oh gosh,
the drop-off issues, punishing on drop-off days.
Yep.
So these are the days that the child is transitioning between homes, and I remember this. I remember being in the morning of and going, why is there so many discipline issues right now?
Yeah.
And thinking, well, let's do this or let's do that, and I'm like, well, he's leaving in 3 hours, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Well, and I think kids know that too. So transition days can be very hard on children. They can be very stressful. They can be very anxiety provoking. And that's why it's good to have communication with your kids and almost like preparation. But you guys, oftentimes, our kids are dealing with that stress and they're about to transition to the other home. So there are a lot of reactions that aren't normal. And there can be where they're acting out. And so and you're having to discipline and they know, they're like, hey, I'm fixing to leave mom's house and I'm going to dad's house. So it doesn't matter what I do or say because I know that dad's not going to discipline me over there, so it's like a free pass for them.
Yeah.
So we just want to dive deeper into how we cannot allow that free pass.
Yeah. So I'll go a couple of different ways with this. So I think if you have a great relationship with your ex-spouse or a good relationship, part of that good relationship. So if you're thinking in your mind, I have a good relationship with my ex-spouse. Well, part of that scenario should be disrespecting my ex-spouse is like disrespecting me.
Yeah.
So whatever punishment is handed there, I collectively hand it here. And I know that's difficult. But if you really, really have your eye on raising healthy, the child in the healthiest way possible, that is a great way to do that because children need to understand consequences, especially younger children. They just need to understand that. And if you're that parent who literally just has your kids on the weekends, I understand how that can be super challenging.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm here to bond and have fun and that this is the time that we have. And if there's an issue at our house, we'll discipline.
Yeah.
But I don't want to carry that over.
Yeah.
So you may not be in that first scenario where you're carrying over discipline. But as a parent, the flip side of this is if you are disciplining your children and they are going to go to the other parent, kind of creating that expectation that go and have fun, but when you come back, the discipline will start. The only thing I would challenge you there is maybe not make that discipline start the second they get back. Because again, children have so much anxiety with transitioning houses. That's a big deal. And so this concept like, well, the second I get back in the house, my phone's gone or I'm grounded in my room. So it may be a situation where you're like, okay, give the child a day to kind of reacclimate and then come to them and say, hey, okay, we're going to go ahead and institute this discipline because now you're back.
Well, and while they're gone, it gives you time to pray and really think about what is the best discipline. And, like you said, Scott, giving them that day off when they come back or however long it is. But sitting down with them and just kind of revisiting what happened before they left.
Yeah.
And just being like, okay, this is what happened. You did or said X, Y, and Z, and, this is why we're going to do this. And do you understand why? And then in that process, you'll not only build, a stronger relationship with your children, but there's going to be more trust established there.
Yeah. We know discipline is one of the most stressful parts of being in a blended family. So our hope is that you've taken some of this and depending upon your situation, kind of, mirrored that to this is where I'm at, or this is where I think I'm going, or this is where I've been before. But ultimately, we want you to at least pay attention to this so that, again, you're creating the best blended family situation possible.
Yeah, and I just think the overarching theme of discipline when it comes to blended families is there has to be unity. There has to be that united front. Mark 3:25 tells us that a house divided will not stand.
Yeah.
And so as long as you and your spouse are united, your disciplining is united, your communication is united, you will have united children. You'll have a united family. And it's just going to be that much more stronger.
Yeah. Guys, next week, we are going to be diving into the last part of our series, which is going to be finances. So again, if you haven't already, go back, watch last week, enjoy this week, but stay tuned for next week when we dive into finances and how that affects your co-parenting relationship. Guys, thank y'all so much for joining in. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Be blessed in all that you do.
Hey guys, so glad you were here with us today, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode.
And you can find more resources from Blended Kingdom Families at blendedkingdomfamilies.com. Join us again next time as we hang out with more amazing podcast guests. And remember, nothing will be impossible with God.